Love what you just said, Catherine, and I'm right with you. I like your comment reminded me of this book, Pedagogy of the Press by Paulo Freire, and specifically the difference between the banking model of education, and I forget what the other, dialogic, I suppose. So that one of the really interesting things about that book is it's a critical analysis, I suppose. It really critiques education systems and says it's all bullshit, basically. Like the banking model of education is the concept that you can have a pupil open their brain, which is an empty vessel, and like just pour information into their brain, and somehow that's how they get educated. And so he says that that's bullshit because that's not, one, how people work, and two, it's actually really destructive. And this is how colonial systems basically look at the natives as wild and savages, and basically appropriate culture and resources to create generations of oppression. And he says that, you know, the point of his work was to help non-literate, so people that could not read, learn how to read. And he basically challenges the concept of the banking model by naming it, analyzing it, decomposing it, and then calling it bullshit. And then he says, oh, by the way, there's this other thing called dialogic education, which is looking at each person as a full human before working with them, and then realizing that the interaction between teacher and student is as much a learning opportunity for the teacher as it is a student. But in order to get to that mutual learning, the fundamental mechanism by which we engage has to be a dialogue. It has to be a one-on-one. And this is one of the reasons that I hold that practice in my classes, that I want to, if I could, I'd talk to every student for a minimum of an hour every day, except that I die at the end of the first week, right? My goal is always don't die and don't get divorced. And so I have to like structure my life accordingly. But when I, what you just said, Catherine, is actually exactly how my heart resonates. The way that I would think about the resources are like the written language in Paulo Freire's analysis. So when the two, teacher and student, come together in order to have a dialogue, it's around this concept of building literacy. And then the moment that that happens, each person brings their lived experience into that concept. And then the literacy is the reason, is the purpose of the learning experience, but the real learning happens in the dialogue between. And so if I were to build the analogy of the learning code with Paulo Freire's dialogic method of education, I would say like, the written word is to Paulo Freire's analysis what the learning resources in the learning code are to the actual community that Henry's trying to build, and the, very communal-based relationship model that I think is so fundamental to this. One of the real powers is to center learning on informed information about how learning works and about the systemic challenges that learners face. But the real transformation happens in the dialogue between members in our community and the dialogue between the resources themselves and the learner themselves, right? And so I think your analysis is so cogent in that way.